I'm standing now is obviously the Memorial Garden. That was created in 2016 because, as you can appreciate, the age of the veterans, we've been losing them at a high rate through the last 10 years. Most of them are in their 90s. We're only, as far as I'm aware, left with 3 veterans that were part of the Polish bomber squadrons. One's 101, one's 104, and I'm not sure about the age of the other one. So they're the few last remaining veterans from the Polish side, and the RAF is very similar, just purely because of the age limit. So this was created in 2016. There's a piece of land directly behind you that you'll see, which is obviously just plain soil. That is going to be our remembrance garden. That will create the 4 flower beds, which will replicate the checkerboard, the Polish checkerboard. So it'll be red, white, and we'll have small memorial stones that families who have a connection here can purchase and have engraved on there, and that will be a permanent reminder. And we'll have a big flagpole in the middle with the RAF ensign and the Polish Air Force flag to go next to it. The group of volunteers that we've had here over the last 12 years have renovated and created. So all the pathways that you walk on have been created by the volunteers. Even the hedges that you're next to here have all been grown by us in the time we were here, when we arrived 10 years ago. So the render had been knocked off over years, weather, damp, etc., etc. And the building was covered around the edge with trees. So we had to get rid of the trees first of all, and then slowly we've gradually rendered and created the building you see now. There was no glass left, very few frames, they're all rusted. So all those are new, the double glazed, but they have they're called Home Light by Crittall Company, and so they're authentic looking, but they just give that double glazed help for us to try and keep the building warm. These buildings were always all put up with the intent they had a 10-year life. So 80 years later, the fact they're still standing is pretty amazing. And you think that every morning, whether you're male or female, you had to trudge across the fields, and it's about 200 or 300 yards either way, to get your breakfast, to get your dinner. Inside this building, the north wing, which was the dining room, it would have had 2 very small pot-bellied stoves to heat it, and that was the only heating they had. So when you get a chance to go in there and have a little look, you can imagine a tiny pot-bellied stove at either end. That's why a lot of the photographs you see, they're keeping their jackets on, and some are even keeping their coats on. has taken 12 plus years to get where we are today, and as I say, all the volunteers, we're run top to bottom by volunteers. There's no paid staff. We're a registered charity, and what we'll eventually achieve here is a permanent reminder and a permanent exhibition to not just tell the story of the people who were here and served at RAF Ingham, but the Polish bomber squadrons, male and female, and the jobs that they did. Not just to tell about the stories about the air crews, but the ground crew as well. Because for those of you perhaps not served in an RAF situation or anything like that, it's very much a triangle. Your pilot is at the top, or your air crew is at the top of the pyramid, and there's a lot of people that have to do what they're doing, from mechanics to cooks to armourers to everybody else on the pyramid to get the aircraft off the ground. So part of what we're going to be doing here is telling individual stories as well. So we're not just going to say, this was a pilot and this is what he did. We're going to say, here's Jan, he was a rear gunner, and tell the story about Jan, or tell the story about all different people. A few pieces in the cabinet straight opposite you are just a very small fraction. Many Polish families have actually loaned or donated a lot of the artifacts from their father or grandfather who was in the Polish Air Force. So I do encourage you to go and have a little look at those. We just picked 3 for today, and in the bottom of the cabinet, straight in front of us, are several pieces of kit that either the navigator or the bomb aimer would have used. There's a small card in front which explains a little bit about what they do. There we go. Please enjoy the day. Have a look round. If you've got any questions, no question is a silly question, as they always say. And if I can't answer it, I'll try and find somebody who can. But I'd like to say, for most things, Polish Air Force, I know most things that we all know. So, all right. Thank you very much. At the end of the Second World War, as you're probably all aware, the Russians or the Soviets had taken the whole of Eastern Europe, and when peace finally came, Roosevelt, they had the Yalta Agreement in beginning of 45, and it was Stalin, Churchill and Roosevelt. But to be honest, Churchill was just really a bit of a puppet, because it was Roosevelt and it was Stalin who made all the choices, and Churchill had to go along with what Roosevelt wanted. I'm not colouring politics at all, and I'm trying to keep out of it, but that's the actual facts. So at the end of the day, they just decided to slice, give or take, where they'd finished the war, where things were. And you all remember, for those of you who are old enough, remember Berlin, when that was split down the middle. Although Berlin was well into East Germany, which was all part of the communist side. So bearing that in mind, Poland was very much in the communist sector. At the end of the war, the Polish airmen and women wanted to go back to Poland. It was their home country. Those that went straight back found that they were being arrested. Some were imprisoned and some were even being executed, because they believed at the time, the communists believed, that they were spying for Britain because it was the beginning of the Cold War. Word got back very, very quickly, and then the Poles wouldn't leave Britain. So the British government had to do something about it. And they made 2 main acts of parliament. 1946, they created the Polish Resettlement Corps Act, which basically meant that at the end of the war, all of the Polish personnel had to take all their insignia that they got. They used to wear the Poland on the tops of their arms, Polish badges, buttons and the badges. That all had to be removed because the communist government in Poland wanted all the people back and wanted the aircraft. So Britain, being rather crafty, said, right, we'll assimilate you into the British forces, and they did that using the Polish Resettlement Corps. So for up to 2 years, they stayed in the military and they could learn a trade of some kind, be it carpentry, electrical, mechanical. As soon as they got a job, they were allowed to go out into the community, and they kind of became British, and they could apply for British citizenship. That all tied in with the next act, which was the Polish Resettlement Act of 1947, which allowed the Poles and their families to settle in Britain or any of the old Empire/Commonwealth countries, and we included in that South Africa and America. A lot of them chose to do that and find new lives in Australia, Canada, etc., but an awful lot still stayed here, of which in your audience now, talking to all of you, some of you may well be 4th or even 5th generation Poles that have been here since the end of the war. The other problem we've got at the end of the war, there was still food rationing on. People always think the end of the war came and that was the end of food rationing. No, food rationing was on for several more years after that. So what happened was, and I'll go one step back from that, there was also a housing shortage. So the War Department came up with a simple idea: barrack blocks, which was a Nissen hut with a wall at either end, and it was a metal tube. Go away. They created a miniature house inside each one, so that the Polish families had somewhere to live. In between each Nissen hut, the Poles created small vegetable gardens, and obviously grow your own became a very important thing. So these sites were all over the UK and Scotland, and some were Polish Army, some were Polish Air Force. We had one down in the village of Ingham, and we had Polish Resettlement Corps Centre at Dunham Lodge, the old airfield you probably just remember, opposite Scampton. So what we've done here is we took various parts of one of the old huts that was based down in our village of Ingham, and we've recreated it. Obviously the shell is new, but the ribs inside are original, the doors inside are original. So I recommend, obviously you get a chance, go in and have a look. It was quite an austere life in there. The sun's shining today. You go in there, certainly the other side of the hut, put your hand against the wall. You won't be able to, you can fry an egg on it, it's that hot. Yet during the winter, it just drips with condensation because it's metal. Hot and cold, condensation occurs. But it was better than living in a tent. So the Polish families lived in those for a couple of years until they found, proper bricks and mortar, shall we say. These huts were still used right to the beginning of the 60s by local government, British local government, for people at the bottom end of the house. The building we've got here is now the back of our cafe. Unfortunately, the render hasn't taken very well, as you can see bubbling. But this was the food preparation building. So if you go right round to the other side of the building, there used to be 2 doors. So all the vegetables and all the meat for the kitchens were produced in there, and then walked through to the kitchen, which is the building behind it, and obviously the cooking was done there. As I explained at the beginning, one of the dining rooms is still there that we use, the north, where all the big displays are in at the moment, and there used to be a second one, which now we're using the base for our workshop. So we don't think we'll ever rebuild that because it's quite a big project. A lot of other projects that we're hoping to do. It is our intent, future intent. In the woods here, Hare's Wood at the back here, there's an incredible amount of old parts of buildings and the concrete basis for buildings. Because all these buildings were put up very, very quickly. There's no foundations as such. They just put a concrete pad down and then started building on that. Hence probably the fact that they've got a 10-year life. But they're testament to the fact they're still here. Right. As part of this, obviously the fences are new. This is the edge of our land at the moment. But just here we've got a blast trench. Now a blast trench, unlike an air raid shelter, never had a roof on it. So there's an entrance that side, there's an entrance on the other side. It's almost like a long Z. And the idea was when the air raid warning went off, you ran down into them, crouched down, and the idea was it was more not for bombs, but it was more for machine guns. If the enemy was strafing, as in using machine guns, it was going to give you some protection. It was very quick. These are dotted all over the whole of the airfield site. And they were the simple things. There are some underground air raid shelters, the Stanton ones, but they're more in the woods, so we haven't got access to those. So originally, on this big concrete thing here, where the nice heap of stuff is, that used to be the NAFI. So that was their club. and it had a long building. You can see another replica of that, which is in better condition, obviously, because it's built, at Thorpe Camp, if you get the chance. The old roadway still goes all the way round the back, and the Sergeant's Mess and various other buildings around the back. The the brick building over there was one of the food stores. There was another one next to it, which has long since gone, and you can appreciate a lot of these buildings, because they were only built or intended to be around for 10 years, single skin brick. They've just deteriorated over the years, and the farmers have probably just knocked them down to prevent them falling on somebody. We've got a 25-year lease on this, where you can see the fence going round. That's our footprint of land for 25 years. Everything else belongs to a separate farmer, which is why we've had to block it all off, because he doesn't like people wandering onto his land. We know what's there, but we're not allowed to go in there. So it's like many heritage centres. We've got our little footprint, if you like. But we're happy with that at the moment, but conversations will happen in the future to hopefully kind of expand what we've got here. Okay. All right.
What's going to happen after 25 years? What landowners?
If I was a betting man, I would like to think that in the next couple of years we renegotiate the lease to increase our footprint, should I say? Right. But that's all speculation at the moment. We have a tenant farmer, and above that we have the landowners. So we have to, as we did when we first got this, we have to do negotiations with them. They have to see how we've progressed, because at the end of the day, this was a building where most of the roof had fallen in. It was just full of potato boxes and fertiliser. We've got some lovely old video footage of about 2009 when we first came and looked at this building and said, this would be good. So we've raised and we've put about £500,000 into getting this building where it is today, plus the heating that's coming in 2 weeks' time. This building still belongs to the landowner, so we'll be saying to him, this is what we've done, this is the commitment we've given. So that is our part of our commitment. When we first started this, and the landowners openly said, you're crazy when we started this. They thought we were absolutely bonkers, but that was the belief, that was the journey. That's the journey we've been on for 13 years. 13 years now. So we've had the lease for 11 years. So, but the intent is it will become bigger because we need more space to tell everybody's story and to tell the stories we're going to tell. Eventually, we might have, it'll be a reproduction one, but we're hoping to have a Wellington down near the front gate as a gate guardian. But it'll be fiberglass because there are only 2 full Wellingtons left anywhere. One's at the RAF Museum at Cosford and the other one's down at Brooklands. And I'm sure neither of them are going to be happy to part with theirs and lend them to us for a few years. So we will, and of course as soon as anything is out in the open, it starts to deteriorate from day one. So having a huge fiberglass one to replicate it makes more sense, it'll be more durable, and it will set off our main entrance at the front.